I pretended I hadn't heard this and added, "And then I didn't see you for years afterward. And Suzanne and I broke up, and then Mark dragged me to the college reunion, the 15th. And there you were, dating a friend of mine." "Don't remind me. How did you ever meet up with him? I forget." "I forget, too. And I stole you away from him right there in the Hilton ballroom. We eloped to that club on Avenue A, one of those black basements, and we danced until 3 in the morning, and I took you back to my loft." Saying this, I grabbed her and led her through a few steps, but her body was stiff as a mannequin, not like it used to be. "Chaz, what are you doing?" "Oh, nothing, just thinking about old times. I've been spending a lot of time on memory lane recently, you know. Bullshit about my life. How things could have been different if only—" "Yes, but that's something you have to work on yourself. I can't get into that with you. I tried once, if you recall, and it nearly killed me. So you know you can't come around here and be all sweet and loving and expect me to leap into your arms." Looking bright darts of flame at me. A little moment of heartbreak here, and then she pulled away and said, "So let's see what these look like." We stood the paintings up against a wall. Paintings always look so helpless and wan against a white gallery wall, like they're crying, "Save me." But she thought they were terrific, and decided right then to combine them in the show she was planning to open that Friday. Guy named Stecki from Bratislava does Hopper-esque alienation scenes from Central Europe. Empty cafes, rusting factories, people in shabby overcoats waiting for the trolley. Not my idea of something for the living room, but he can draw at least. Proud to have my crap on the same wall as his crap. "They should fly off the walls," I said lightly. "Everyone loves a celebrity." She ignored this and stood in front of Kate Winslet, staring for a long minute, and then the same with the others, shaking her head. "My God," she said, "do you know, I can't think of another contemporary painter who could pull this off. This incredible bravura. You like them? Honestly? Aside from their commercial value, I hate them. This is what's between us. Do you realize that? That you can do this. That you can take something that comes from God Almighty to maybe 3 people on the whole planet and treat it as a big laugh. Kate Winslet. Madonna." I said, "I don't see what the difference is between that and painting princesses in the 17th century or plutocrats' daughters in the 19th. That's not the point. As you know very well, these are pastiches. But the paintings I saw that night at your show, I remembered them all those years later. And when you showed up in that hotel, it was the memory of them that made me fall in love with you. Leave the very nice businessman I was with and run off with you, like a different kind of woman than I thought I was. Because those paintings were not pastiches. They were you. Not Velázquez, not Goya. Charles Wilmot, Jr., I said. "Yes, and in a junior way you've let your gift curdle and turn to acid and eat away your heart, just like your father, as you never stopped telling me. Except not as rich. Well, my dear, I'm sorry I didn't become a famous, wealthy artist for you." "Oh, fuck you," she shouted. "Fuck you, and damn you to hell. You sucked me into this again, you bastard. Get out of here. Go on. Scram. I have work to do. And don't forget you promised to take the kids on Friday." With that, I was out in the street, feeling like shit, and then drove back to Bosco's to drop the keys off and paid for the van use, as usual, by listening to his political rants and art theories. Most people know his work. Life-size, anatomically correct stuffed cloth figures, giant rag dolls with smooth white blank faces upon which he projects video loops. The effect is uncanny. Despite the abstraction, you read the doll as having a talking face. Some of them are animated by internal motors and push rods, so that our president, for example, is seen having dog-style intercourse with a large stuffed pig as he gives a speech about Iraq. Given the politics of the art community in New York and L.A., Bosco sells a lot of this work. Denny bent my ear about Wilhelm Reich, a current hero of his, and showed me an orgone box he built for one of his dolls, a lush beauty in shocking pink, but with the white face, and she's lying on a cot in the box, and there's a mechanism that makes her writhe and move her hand against her crotch. He paid a couple of dozen girls to make videos of their faces as they masturbated to orgasm, and we had a beer and watched as he ran them in a loop against the face of his boxed odalisque, with the accompanying cries and squishy noises, of course. An interesting experience. We discussed the faces, whether you can tell acting from feeling, and about what warped desire for exhibitionistic fame would compel obviously middle-class young women to participate in such a project. Bosco said it was because none of them wanted to be president of the United States, which seemed to be the only restriction on behavior nowadays. Then we talked about his next project, which involved dust from the 9/11 attacks. All of us living in Lower Manhattan were showered with the gray cloud on that day, but Bosco had collected a whole barrel of it, consisting of pulverized buildings, computers, firemen, terrorists, bond traders, etc., and wanted to use it in a project that would piss all over the cult of 9/11 in the most offensive way possible. Most artists nowadays have made their peace with the bourgeoisie, the class from whence they arise, and the class that pays their bills, in return for which they supply a little frisson of outrage, usually of a sexual nature. But Bosco still believes in the power of art, and thinks that anarchy is the only proper politics for a conscious artist. He considers me a Neolithic reactionary and accuses me of Republican sympathies. "You're a fucking fascist, Wilmot," he always says, "in everything but the lust for gold and power. You're like sex without orgasm, sweaty, uncomfortable, expensive, with no payoff. You're a sellout who never collected the check. We've been friends for 20 years, ever since the day of the drywall. Nice guy, wouldn't hurt a cockroach, 2 grown kids, been married for decades, lives in a big Dutch colonial house in Montclair, New Jersey, a perfect phony and a happy man." And speaking of phony, after I got finished with Bosco, I went over to Mark Slade downtown to see what Slotsky wanted. It was lunchtime, and I figured he'd spring for a meal. The girl in black said he'd gone out, but she expected him back soon. Nice-looking kid, and I thought I recognized her from one of the orgasm clips, although Bosco said that since he collected the vignettes, he's been thinking that every woman between 18 and 40 he sees on the streets is one of the ones on the doll's face. Slotsky was showing a kid named Emile Mono, big square tricolored abstracts in the loose dramatic style of Motherwell, one ground color, a blob of another color, and some blobs and streak of a third color. Perfectly respectable work, suitable for corporate lobbies, hotel meeting rooms, and the Whitney Biennial. I really have no problem at all with work like this, in most cases a kind of wallpaper, anodyne, meaningless, or rather announcing the fact that meaning no longer inheres in painting. Pretty colors, though. I recall once when I was in Europe, a dozen or so years ago, in the Prado, as a matter of fact, and I got caught in one of the endless corridors they've got stuffed with barely distinguishable academic painting, all brownish remakes of Rubens and Murillo, and I felt like I was drowning in sepia. I practically ran out of the place and walked down the Paseo to the Reina Sofia Modern Art Museum and into a cool white room, and there was a Sonia Delaunay that was like a little girl singing on some bright terrace, lovely and fresh, just some watery stripes and numerals and letters, and it cleaned my eye, the way the art needed to have its eye cleaned around the tail end of the 19th century. And God bless them all, the non-figuratives, but I can't do it myself. I am chained to the world as it is. But yeah, it's a way to paint, and Cézanne is as good a daddy as anyone. Art is a universe in parallel with nature and in harmony with it, as he famously said. True enough, as long as you keep a grip on the harmony within nature part. I just find 95% of it as exhausting to look at as those miles of brown, slick, academic pap. I hung around for 40 minutes or so, drank some free coffee, and was just going to leave or strike up a conversation with the girl, maybe about art, when Slotsky came in. He was dressed for uptown, double-breasted suit, handmade shoes. He's always reminded me of my father in his good clothes, maybe an actual model there. His own father did not dress like that. He seemed glad to see me. A hug, not a shake. That's a newish affectation. Mark always trendy that way, and ran me back to his office behind the gallery. He looked reasonably well, I thought, or as well as a short, pudgy fellow with floppy lips and white eyelashes ever looks. He still has his Harpo mop of yellow curls, now a little tarnished with age, but still his logo, as it was at school. Mark no longer wears all black. Since he started selling Old Masters some years ago, he has adopted the English squire look, which suits him rather better, since combined with his features and general carriage, his former all-black costume inevitably recalled the Hasidim rather than urban sophistication, although he doesn't look much like an English squire either. For example, he'd left the last button on the sleeve of his suit jacket partially open, so that knowledgeable people could tell that he had real buttonholes, and therefore that the suit had been custom-made. I don't know any actual English squires, but I kind of doubt they do this. We took a cab to Chez Guerlain, the place du jour, I guess. Not the kind of joint I would ever go to, but sort of interesting in a natural history way. They seated us at a banquet table, right side front, which is the supreme place to be in this particular beanery, a fact he related to me shortly after we sat down. He then told me which famous people were dining with us, cautioning me not to stare, which I was in any case not inclined to do, except I stared at Meryl Streep. Mark's shamelessness is a legend and is part of his charm.